Hello, this is John from caveofprogramming.com. This is a tutorial on using JUnit to test your Java code. So in this tutorial I'm going to show you the basics of using JUnit, and then I'm going to go on to testing some specific code that I've written just to give you an actual example of it. And in fact this video is part of a free course on design patterns in Java. And I'm inserting this JUnit stuff here because in the last video I created a person database access object, which I now need to test because this is something that's really useless to write without testing it. So I thought this would be an opportune place to put some stuff about JUnit. Now I'm using Eclipse here, and the stuff I'm about to tell you applies to pretty much any IDE. It's just that it's going to differ a little bit from IDE to IDE. But this is Eclipse, and the first thing I need to do is I've got this project containing code that I want to test, and the first thing to do is create a new folder to put your tests in. You don't have to do that. You can put tests in your existing kind of source package, because JUnit test cases are just Java classes that you run in a special way, but it's nice to separate out test code from your production code. So I'm going to right click this folder in Eclipse and go to new source folder, and I'll call this source folder tests. It doesn't matter what you call it, of course. Now I'm going to create a new JUnit test case, and a test case is a collection of tests, and you can collect together test cases into test suites. So I'm just going to right click this test folder and go to new JUnit test case. If you don't see this JUnit test case in this menu, try going to other and have a look there, because JUnit is included with all major integrated development environments these days, so it should be there. So I'll go to new JUnit test case, and this is just a Java class basically with some particular methods, and I'm going to call this, actually I'm going to call this one person DAO tests. The reason being that I want to test a object called a class called person DAO, so just give it an appropriate name, and typically you probably want to call it something or other tests because it's a test case, or call it something or other test case, something along those lines. There are some special methods that I can add here: set up before class, tear down after class, tear down and set up. And I'm going to tick to say that I want all of those because I am going to use most of them, and I want to demonstrate them to you. So if you want to do any kind of initialization or cleanup related to your tests, then try ticking those methods, and you need to use ones that are appropriate, which we'll go into. So I'll click finish, and I could, by the way, put this in a package, but it doesn't matter too much, and just for the moment I'll put this in the default package, and I'll click finish. So here's my JUnit test class. Now, last time I used this actually in like a proper job, my memory is that this was quite different. I think this has changed quite a lot, because the JUnit test case, which this is, according to my memory at least, used to extend some JUnit class, and now it seems it doesn't. And also, this is an example of an actual method that will run a test. And again, my memory is that this didn't used to need this annotation here, but now apparently it does. So some things have changed, and this is the latest version I'm looking at here. It's all basically the same. So if you're using for some reason a very old version of JUnit, or you used to use JUnit, then it's not radically different to how it used to be, but there seem to be some differences. And here we've got an example of a test that will fail. So a test is just a public void method, and it has this test annotation, and we call various methods that are actually contained in a class called org.junit.assert. And this assert class contains very static methods like fail that you can use to pass your tests or fail your tests depending on what happens. And we're doing a static import here to import the methods of this assert class, but fail is actually assert.fail. It's just static static import, or at least I thought it was. Let's just click this and import assert. Have I got the right import? I hope so. So we use the methods of this assert class. It's just that we usually it's kind of better to type them without the class name and just to use this static import that allows you to bring the static methods into your kind of namespace and call them directly without the actual class. So if I run this now, this test is going to fail. And in fact, you can run JUnit tests as like a standalone Java program, which I won't go into here, but if you Google for that, you'll find some example code on the internet, and it's very easy just to run it as a standalone program. But the absolute easiest way is just to run it in your IDE. So I've got my person DAO tests class, my test case here selected, and I'll just click the run button and it opens this JUnit tab, and we see here that we've done one run of the tests and we've got one failure here. And it says actually not yet implemented, which is fine. So let's change this demo method to something a little bit more useful, and I'll show you just a really trivial example to start with. So I'm going to say here test arithmetic, or actually let's call it test demo. This is going to be something that you wouldn't normally bother testing, and I'm going to say here I'm going to type some Java code, and this would normally be Java code that I've already written and now want to test, but I'm just going to say int value equals 7 and value, let's say plus equals 2. So now value should be 9, and let's test Java. Let's check that that actually is 9. So I'll use methods of the assert class, and if I type assert dot, then the autocomplete will help me. And it's got methods for comparing arrays, for asserting that stuff is false or not null or not the same, and it's got these assert true methods which are very easy to use. And I'm going to use here, well, let's use assert equals. So let's say assert dot assert equals, and now I can type the expected value, which will be 9, and the actual value, which will be whatever's in this value variable. So I'm testing that this arithmetic worked, which is ridiculous, but it's just an example. And what you should also do is supply a message for each test. So there's an overloaded version of this assert equals method, and I can say here check that arithmetic works in Java. Kind of ridiculous, but there you go. And if I just get rid of that assert dot, then because I've got the static import there, up here I'm doing import static org.junit.assert.star, then I just need a method name by itself actually. I just use the class for the sake of the autocomplete. If you get an error at that point, click the error, and you probably need to do something like add static import to get this method. Let's run this now, and now if I run it, it passes. So we've got a test that passes. If it were to fail, so let's type the wrong value in here, then the message that we typed here, check that arithmetic works in Java, is now coming out down here. Or if you run this from a little, let's say, console mode program using a freestanding program to run the test, which is very easy to do, just a few lines of Java, then you'll see this message on the console or wherever you've run it. There is also even a freestanding GUI version of JUnit, which at one point it seemed to go missing or something, but I'm sure it's still around if you look for it. So let's now, in the rest of this tutorial, I'm going to write some code to test my specific code that I've already written, which is some database code. And we'll need to use these methods here. So setup runs before every test, every one of these test methods that you can add, and teardown will run afterwards. Let's put a sysout in here so you can see it running. Setup, and let's say sysout or syso, you can also just type teardown. And setup before class is going to run once before all the tests, so it's just going to run once. Let's say setup before class, and here teardown after class will run once after all your tests are complete. So tear down after class. And if I run this now, maybe I'll change the 19 back to 9 so that works. And if I run this now, we can see that we're running setup before class, tear down after class at the end, and before every test I run setup, then I run the test, and then I run tear down. So let's just say here, running demo test. And if I click run, you can see that running demo test is run before setup and, sorry, before tear down and after setup. So let's add some more tests. And my person DAO that I want to test, actually, it connects to a database and it gives me create, retrieve, update and delete methods for dealing with inserting and getting stuff out of the database. And I could start by testing the create method, which is called add person. So let's go to my test case and let's create a new method. I'll put the test attribute on it. So there's my @ sign and then test with a capital T. Public void test create. I'll call it test create because it's testing a creation method. And in here, let's run my code. So I've got these person objects. So I'll create a couple of those. Person 1 equals new person with a name Bob and a password of let me in. This is my own specific code that I want to test. And let's add the input there with Control-Shift-O. And person, let's have another one. Person 2 equals new person. Let's say Sue and password hello. Okay, so I'm going to need to connect to my database, and the right place to do that is in setup before class, because this is only going to run once before all my tests. So I've got this singleton object that I wrote. I'm going to say database.getInstance.connect to connect to my database. And you can throw exceptions from any of these methods, actually. So if that doesn't work, it's going to throw an exception, which you'll then see in this console on the left here. And in tear down after class, I can say database.getInstance.disconnect to use my own database code to disconnect from the database. In setup, now if you're testing database code or you're testing anything that maintains a state, you need to make sure that your stuff, your database or whatever, is in a known state before you run every test. And when I first started using JUnit, I made the horrible mistake of having one test rely on another and expecting them to execute in a fixed sequence, and that just leads to you wanting to tear your hair out. So don't do that. Make sure your database is initialized in a known state before you run every test. And in this case, I'm going to use the actual code, some of the actual code that I actually want to test to just clear this database table. Actually, if you're testing database code, you should really use kind of raw connection code to get results from your database and check them against what you're testing. So, for example, I should use my own methods to add stuff to my database here, and then use JDBC code to get stuff out my database and compare it to the code that I've written. But because that's quite long-winded, and I'm very lazy, and I don't want this tutorial to be 3 hours long, I'm just going to use my own methods to test other methods. And if you do that, of course, there's a risk that you could have two bugs that kind of even each other out. But it does give you a fairly high degree of confidence that your code is correct. So I'm just going to do that. So here in setup, I'm going to say I've got a class called DAO Factory, and that has a method called getPersonDAO, which gets me a database access object. So I'm going to say person DAO, let's call it DAO, equals DAO factory.getPersonDAO. Add the import there. And on the next line now, I'm going to say DAO.delete all, which will clear my table. So at this point, I should really be using raw JDBC rather than the methods that I'm actually trying to test. But this is a lot better than having no tests at all. Much better, in fact. So at least this is a step in the right direction. And now I'm going to need this person DAO here as well. So let's get it at this point. And so I'm going to use the DAO to add two people to my database. So I'll say DAO.add person1 and DAO.add person2. Now, these throw exceptions as it happens, and I could either throw the exceptions from my tests, or I could catch the exceptions and fail the tests if the exception happens by calling the fail method assert.fail. Either approach is fine, really. It's up to you, and I think for the sake of brevity here, I'm just going to add a throws declaration. Because that'll just be quicker, but it may be better to catch any exceptions and fail your tests if your code throws exceptions. It's up to you. Now I'm going to use my DAO itself, and I should really be using JDBC at this point, but I'm going to use the DAO to actually get data from my database now. I'm going to get a list of people from my database, and because I cleared the database in setup, in the setup method, then there should only be these two people in my database that I've just added. Let's say people equals DAO.getPeople. Or maybe I just called it, maybe I didn't call it get people. Let's take a look. I called it get, it should be in here somewhere. So I've got get person. Am I somehow overlooking it? Let's take a look at person DAO. It's possible that I deleted this method by mistake. Well, that's weird. I think I did. Let me do a Control Z on here. Yeah, I deleted my get person method by mistake, strangely. Okay, I've got this get people method that I want to use. So I'm going to say DAO.get people. And now, so for that I should have used JDBC, but it's too much trouble, so I won't. And now I just need to add in some asserts to check that this list is equal to these two people here. And there are methods in the assert class for comparing arrays and for doing all kinds of stuff. But I think what I'll do is I'll do assert equals to start with, and I'll say should be two people in database, and for the expected value now I'm going to type 2, and for the actual value I'm going to put people.size, because my list of people that I've just retrieved from the database should have only 2 people in it, the ones that I've just added here. And then I'm going to check that I've got the right people, so I'm going to use assert equals again, actually, and let's say these 2 people should be the same, and the now the expected value, so you always type the expected value and then the actual value, so expected should be person 1, this person here that I added to the database, and the actual value is DAO dot, no it's not, it's people dot get index 0, so the first person in my list. And also I could check the second one as well. So again, it's up to you as how thorough you make this. And these are, in effect, these are, what am I doing here? This should be person 2, like that, and this should be index 1. So these are, in effect, these are separate tests, but you think of this as being one test that passes if all of these pass. And you have multiple methods of these in your test case. The whole class is the test case, and you can, if you want, collect the test case together in test suites, which I won't do here, but you can. Now, this assert equals will actually use the dot equals method to compare stuff. So if I'm comparing 2 people, I need to implement that method. So people are just, person is just my a class that I've written myself, a kind of bean class that has an ID, name and a password. And in this particular case, with my particular code here, my database will actually assign an ID when I add the person to the database. So I can't know that in advance, but what I want to do is have an equals method, dot equals, that compares name and password. So I'll just quickly implement that by right-clicking in my class and going to source, generate hashcode and equals, and ticking name and password, but not ID, which I don't care about. Clicking OK. And now if I go back to my person DAO tests, if I run this, we hope to see that this test will pass. Let's run it. And we see we've run 2 tests and we've got no failures and no errors. And there's nothing coming out down here, and the bar's green, so it's all good. If there was something wrong here, let's say I have 0 for the index here, and I run this, and I find that I don't get what I expect, then we'll get failure messages down here, and here it's saying these 2 people should be the same, which is the message that I typed here, and we've got the line number as well where it failed. So that is a basic introduction to JUnit. I've pretty much plumbed the depths of my own knowledge. I don't do this JUnit testing very often. I must admit, not as often as I should. And as you can see, you can get by knowing very little about JUnit. There's more to it than I've shown you, but to be honest, probably not that much more. And it is in essence a pretty simple technology. And I could, of course, now I should go on to add more of these methods like test, test delete, test retrieve, and so on. I should add more tests to this test case, but I'll just leave it there for the moment. Now this video is part of a series of videos on design patterns in Java, and you can find more videos if you go to caveofprogramming.com. So if you go to, let's see, where's Chrome here? If you go to www.caveofprogramming.com, you can find a bunch of free courses on Java. I'm always making new free videos. Here's the Java Design Patterns one, which is actually hosted on udemy.com at the moment. And if you scroll down, you can also find a load of YouTube videos as well. So lots of stuff there. If you find this course useful, please consider linking to caveofprogramming.com somewhere, which would be wonderful. It helps me to pay my rent by promoting my paid courses. And even in the courses that are not free, I always have some free videos. So certainly check those out. In the next course in this particular series, the next video in this particular series, I'm going to probably look at extending the database access object design pattern to cope with different databases, and we're going to go on to look at more design patterns in Java. So do join me again for the next video, and until next time, happy coding.